we have a little agency within a very large commercial agency that represents 12 photographers and maybe the same amount of fashion stylists, some film directors and creative directors. And I guess we're here to show you guys what we do and not that business.
So we're going to start with our still life photographer, Robin Broadbent. Do you want to start with this?
Yeah. So what we thought we'd do is show you our photographers, and as you guys go into the commercial world or fine art, wherever you go into from here, we're going to take you on the arc of our photographers' career from sort of their personal work into what we do for them, which is their commercial success. So we'll start with a still life guy who came from St. Martin's in London and did his own work for a long time and was a still life food photographer, then started doing this kind of work for himself. This is like an editorial that he did for which is just a shoot for a magazine, the cover of a magazine called Luxor, which happened fairly recently, but this is the kind of work he was doing when Lee and I met him. This is also, like, it's recognizable as a perfume bottle, but he did this for, when we say in an editorial shoot, that's for a magazine in which, this particular one is for Numero magazine, it's a fashion magazine, and they'll approach Robin or us and ask him to do a shoot, and he has to pay for it. It's like, being in a magazine like this is not advertising. He has to, whatever the cost, he has to pay for it, so he'll do some totally his own idea, like making a very dark bottle and an abstract picture. This one's from the same story. But why he's willing to do these pictures, because I think they're really beautiful, and so does Lee, and you guys should too. But from here, we send these pictures then to a client like Gray Advertising or McCann that represents a larger, or Coty, who does actually fragrance campaigns. And if we keep going, maybe we can see it's another. Then he's got this. Then we made a deal with Balenciaga, or their agency actually in Paris, M2M, and he got this, which he got paid a lot of money for, from doing those last 4 pictures, which he paid for. And that started with the skull with the crown. The guy who was the creative director of Balenciaga thought that was beautiful. Went to see all the Numero pictures, which he, paid, I'm guessing, $6,000 a picture for, like $20,000 a day, something like that. But then ends up with the Balenciaga, which is, 5 pictures for $50,000 or something. This also, Smirnoff was another client that came directly from his editorial of loving the way he makes glass look. And at the point, this one is with model makers too. He didn't do he does everything. You guys, as digital photographers, you guys probably are used to doing a lot of things in post, but all of this is in camera. There's a little touching up on the edges, but that's all real, just in case you care. Ciroc Vodka came directly from those two. Then we go into his beauty work. This is, again, editorial. He was obsessed with these makeup things.
Brush.
Editorial. Got to use his own angle on like a compact. Same one. For a great magazine, and this one, and it shows up huge in these beautiful, shiny pages, and they're gorgeous. And then, Estee Lauder. We bring him over to Lloyd & Co., a big agency that represents Estee Lauder, and get him a contract for 5 years shooting Estee Lauder bottles. Perhaps not as beautifully like as what he does in his own work, but it's how we translate him commercially. And he gets to do those pictures you saw before that. La Mer is another client of his. But this is how we translate his work that he loves to do into commercial work that hopefully doesn't, make him feel too godless and too much of a sellout. Another one, Dove, like a campaign that ran for 15 years. Another thing, in a question thing, it would behoove all of you to ask questions about usage too. Like as photographers, he took this picture in probably 1996, and they still pay for it today. Every year they call us. This is more personal work. This was one of the small architectural models from Skidmore, Owens and Merrill to replace the World Trade Center. And he wanted to shoot it, so we paid, the insurance on this model is this big and held together with electrical tape. It's nothing, but just the insurance alone was something exorbitant, but he really wanted to do it for a magazine called Big Magazine. But again, a creative director at Big Magazine saw it, and then he ended up doing some tees for T Magazine, which is the New York Times magazine, same art director. Men's Vogue, like an article about super fancy cheeseburgers. But he did this because the magazine paid for the model maker to make that gold hamburger, and he loves doing that. And that gold hamburger led to shooting a campaign for Vertu cell phones, which I'm told are very expensive. Please buy one after you see these pictures. They're very effective. Same art director as Vertu, thought his still life was so beautiful and his lighting as still life was so beautiful, then they wanted to give him the chance to do basically a still life campaign. This is for Bottega Veneta, which is the shoes and the bags, but in his still life studio, he built this entire set, put models down, and treated it exactly like a still life shoot. Cole Haan was another example, still life shoot. And that same art director then brought him in to do this jewelry for Gerard and this treatment. So it was, with Robin, it's a complete arc of starting with something you love, attracting the attention of an art director who spans in his own career a lot of different things between Gerard and Bottega Veneta, and getting that person to trust you and collaborate on a pretty wide range of stuff. Now we're going to go to a fashion photography team, actually, who started in fine art. It's Jenny Gage and Tom Betterton. And they were discovered at the Luring Augustine Gallery, where Jenny Gage was an artist. I don't know if you guys have been there, but they're a great photography gallery. And the editor of that was from her show called Ventura 2001 or something. The editor of W Magazine, Dennis Friedman, saw this show and gave them, loved it so much that he wanted them to do a fashion story, which this is part of the show. He saw these pictures, he talked to them, he loved them. That's part of the show. And then they did this as a fashion story for W Magazine, and from W, then they did, that's again, just like the Still Life guide, they end up paying for that. But then they do Missoni, which as you can see is in roughly the same style, but it's the Missoni creatives in Italy saw the W Magazine story, which had started with the gallery story, and this is how we sell Jenny and Tom. Again, it's trying to get them compatible with creative directors who are going to appreciate what's close to their heart. That first picture is what they love. That's what they love doing, and this isn't so far away. Getting a great picture of a girl that they, in a weird place.
It's
Another one. This is a book that Jenny and Tom did with an art director who did Missoni. They asked the art director to design a very personal body of work that they did of 3 girls over a year's span in their house in Brooklyn. So this was the advertisement for it, but you take these girls and that book alone, like not just a regular portfolio they send to people. They did this monograph, and we had book signing parties in Paris and New York, and it got a lot of press, and it was a really nice thing. And it's all their personal work, which they love, but we took the book and sold it around. We ended up using even one of the girls from that book, the 3 naked girls, for a Kiki de Malparnasse ad. So it's just the arc of from this to a very glossy, shiny Missoni, and then a Kiki de Montparnasse, a girl in underwear kind of thing. They've had a great career, and they enjoyed it, and we do that together. This is sort of Lee's special thing for them, which I'll let her describe.
So there's a magazine, the Muse magazine. It's a fashion, Italian, really high fashion magazine. And Jenny and Tom got assignment that they want to do like Snow Bunny story. It's a like snowboard brands like Moncler, but they want to styling with a really like nice, colorful accessories. And Jenny and Tom got this inspiration from this catalog. It's an old like 1960s,
80s, but
80s. The images that they got, their idea, inspiration, like mood board. From that idea, they actually translate to this story. It's
based on that.
Based on that.
With Lee's help at our agency, did all these pictures with the casting and everything else based on an old ski magazine that they found, like a book of pictures from an old ski magazine, and the magazine loved it, and just they did all this with whatever clothes are available this year, and that was that's how that started. That's what Lee does for us too, casts it perfectly. Takes the idea from an old magazine to that then had been turned into a book, and then got inspired to a fashion magazine, which they said, great, do it, we love it, we're going to run the whole story. From there, to go to a very commercial side, which I think some of you are going to have to do anyway, and speaking of digital, they got, through their portraits and a lot of that fashion stuff, like many of my photographers, they got a contract at InStyle magazine, which, you know, honestly isn't a great magazine. It's fun to read when you're getting your hair cut or something, but it's really important. Again, something to know about as a photographer going into the commercial world is the syndication of any of these images, of any of these people, Heidi Klum or whoever that other one was, this girl who I love. That syndication alone is like $30,000 after the picture's over in the next 3 months, just from other InStyles. So they take one picture, maybe only get paid $15,000 to shoot the cover of one of those girls, but after that, then every time a magazine wants to run that picture, they have to pay them again. So syndication is a really important thing in digital photography, especially to be aware of, because it's a huge negotiating point that your agents actually figure out for you and get like just an income that keeps rolling in over and over. So at first you'd be like, I'm an art photographer. I would never shoot a picture of Katherine Heigl that cheesy, but trust me, you will. And you'll try and do it in your own way, and they'll hire you because you have a vision and you have what you like, but it's a great way to show how your work can go from your personal work into something super commercial without being so painful. French photographers, we represent another couple from France. It kind of seems to be our specialty, couples who either are married or were married, both within the company and in our artists. These are like what we would call, I guess, very high fashion. These are all for Numero, like a very French fashion magazine, who a lot of people told us they're not going to get a lot of work in New York. It's too much. It's too too fashion, like that first picture. But I love them, and how Lee and I and everyone in our company has based our business is we get to be small and we get to just pick people to work with who we really love. Like your work just has to have a point of view, and we have to love it. We don't have to make any other excuses, but we take this work, you know, and it's like so beautiful, and we can sell it forward to New York Times because of those pictures, loves them so much and wants them to do their own take on that girl, Amy Adams. Mm-hmm. So it's, again, their lighting, their style, their thing. They get to do this for the New York Times. The New York Times flies them from Paris here to do this young actress who they think is interesting, and they get to do their picture. So there, we've proven them wrong. They did this crazy fashion picture with a boob hanging out, and now they're in T Magazine, you know, doing pictures of Amy Adams that are making them a lot of money and getting everyone else's attention. They met through that series of Amy Adams. They met Pedro Almodovar, and have since shot every single actress and actor that he's ever worked with, like a catalog of his work. So that's that's like what they're Argentinian, and they moved to Paris, so they really love his kind of work. So they get to do that as a personal thing. So their portraits are more, they get to do what they love, but also they're making a lot of money doing these portraits, and they say no to a ton of people. They are in love with Tilda Swinton. She's not the youngest, most beautiful model they've ever shot, but they love her, and it pays off. Shalom, they happen to love. This is Bridget Moynihan, right?
Actress, yeah.
An actress who was like, publicity is another thing of celebrity photography, which we could get into for a long time, but they usually like something very, very straightforward and mellow, like InStyle. But her publicists loved their fashion pictures so much that they said, listen, we'll pay you to photograph her, and we'll let you do whatever you want. That was the only reason they said yes. So they got to do what they consider like a fashion picture of someone who you'd see usually a little more boring, like on the cover of InStyle. There. From those fashion pictures, they got to do this, and that ran on the cover of Newsweek, like at a really great time, and they loved it, and they loved the picture. They flew all the way to Budapest to shoot it for nothing, but the syndication company that represents them, that we work with, is like out of their mind from how many times this picture has been resold. It's been out for a month. Lee helped produce. They did this for the New York Times. Again, relationships, which I guess is what we're coming back to. Is all of you, if any of you are going to become commercial photographers, it's all about relationships. And these shoots were all done because of a very, very famous hairdresser. Like places you never think you're going to have relationships pop up. Luigi is a very super, super fancy hairdresser, And from these pictures in the New York Times, which again, they paid to fly themselves to New York, they paid to do, they're beautiful pictures, but it's like Luigi's story, it's a hair story. But from there, he became the creative director of Kerastase and L'Oreal and John Frieda, and they ended up doing these John Frieda ads in Kerastase. So they went from paying for an airplane ticket to getting paid, you know, I don't know, 30 grand for 5 hours worth of work to do something they like. This was another editorial they paid for, but between this, it developed into the next idea, which is Coke Roche in a bathtub, and then Jean-Paul Gaultier took these exact pictures and turned it into a cologne ad. So it was their idea, they're creative, they just wanted to shoot a girl in a bathtub surrounded by flowers, and when they did, Gaultier saw it and paid for them to reshoot the whole thing as an ad.
I just want to show how Sophia and Mauro developed their ideas and come up with a creative idea. This is the Anna Sui. It's a Japanese clothing fashion campaign, and we just did a spring-summer with Anna Sui. And Anna wanted Sophia and Mauro to come up with an idea that how they want to show the campaign, and then they actually had an inspiration from this old magazines and the show called
Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse in
it's
Paris.
like a musical in Paris, and they got all this inspiration from this board, and they come up with this drawing. It's how they want to do the visual for the campaign, and then
which Lee then brings to the Anna Sui people and say, listen, this is what they want to do.
Right, and then for the details, we speak with our clients too, how they want to set up first props and the set, and later, this is the visual that we come up with. It hasn't released yet, but it's going to come out next week.
So don't tell anyone you saw it.
So this is the same, and this is for summer. Those are like mood board, inspiration board. And this is the sketch. It's really hard to see, but she's sitting on the sofa. It's very spring dreamy. And this is also the prop and mood references images. And this is
all
the
work
visual.
a photographer has to do to get a job.
Right.
By the way, the drawings, the references, the lighting references. We were saying earlier today, it's such a literal world. If you like fashion and you want to get into anything commercial or advertising, you really have to do this much work to get it. You almost have to do the whole job before you get the job. And it helps if you've already taken the exact picture. They're like, well, we're selling blue dresses. Do you have any pictures with the blue dress? And we're always like, no, but we will. If you give us the job, we'll have a really great blue dress picture. This is a guy who works coincidentally with his wife. He's Dutch. He went to the Royal Academy of Art at The Hague, and he's having a museum show next month. He's very, very, very specific, and I met him in Europe, in Paris, in 2001, and his book really looked like it. He only had this notebook as a student from The Hague of pictures that he had glued together. This is a picture, for instance, of 2 pages of his notebook. When I met him, this is what he was using as his portfolio, just pictures from magazines that he had glued into this big fat book and then photographed in these interesting ways, like the spray going across. And I worked for Katie Barker at the time, and she was a huge visionary in terms of finding photographers that were gonna, that were special and were gonna do something. And she really got me on board with them, even though they lived in Amsterdam and they won't accept any project that isn't exactly what they do. But from this book, which I carried back with me to New York, we worked through a couple of the other things. They did this for Hermes. They got an Hermes campaign on this because they're really specialized in creating this kind of these structures and things. But it's really, and if Hermes said that they couldn't do this exact thing with a box, they would just turn the job down. And what's kind of interesting about them is they do a lot of editorial. The next picture is a series they did for themselves of things spinning on a turntable. I think that's a bowl. There's a garbage bag that looks really cool. A deli bag just spinning around. Well, at the end, we'd normally have a picture of the gallery where they took all their prints, giant prints of this gallery in this museum in Amsterdam, the Modern Art Museum. I forget what it's called, but they did an installation of every one of their pictures from a magazine because they got to do exactly what they wanted. They ran it into a gallery, and they've done that 3 or 4 times, and they're just embarking on another one of all just rugs hanging on a wire that they've done. A magazine will say, we'll run them, but they're actually doing it for a museum show. So they cross over into It's another one of his book. This was in the New York Times because of their shapes. They did all their spring shoes and stuff. That's an ad, which we got them from this for Arbor Furniture. Like Arbor is they're like Knoll. They make like office chairs and things. And they took this kind of work and were like, they took it from that book and from their Hermes stuff and said, we'll do it. Like this is all, that's another furniture company, Cartel or something. But they just, they hire them only to do exactly what they want. Like they're their own creative directors, they're their own everything. If you can be that kind of photographer, this was for those Bugaboo strollers, which is exactly based on the pictures of the turntables with the garbage bags on them. They just said, we want that and we're gonna let you do it, and they send the stroller to their studio and they get to go. They really are the artists I'm most in love with because they've kept the most true. They've lost out on a lot of money. They turn down a lot of work, but when they do accept it, it's exactly the work that they do. Like you have to hire them exactly who they are. This again, a series of bottles. They were obsessed with those little tester bottles that you get at department stores. When they'd come to New York, they'd collect them all and go through everyone's things on top of their dresser. And then, if we had it here, there's a picture like a gallery. That's another, like McDonald's, they have like, they're Dutch. They're obsessed with that crazy stuff. Hangers. Keep going. Do we not have any pictures of their gallery?
Mixed.
Ads. But those bottles turned into a giant gallery show at their gallery in Amsterdam. Like they printed the pictures huge on the walls and these just big statements of these little bottles. This is actually something really interesting of, again, how I met them right after that book. He started taking pictures out of magazines and fine art books and cutting them out, making each object in this picture is cut out from a different magazine or book, and then photographing that as like a Flemish painting. And actually a big part of my job as his agent was getting him out of having to do that over and over. People saw this series at a gallery and loved it so much that he got maybe 5 or 6 campaigns based on this, but then people only wanted to use him to cut out images and take pictures of other images, and at a certain point, you'll all get sick of whatever you're doing right now too, and he got so sick of it, and we had to spend almost a year trying to get people to think of him as like the guy who makes crazy hangers instead of the guy who makes cutout pictures. So that was a big thing we worked on together. That's the museum in Amsterdam that did his show of the spinning things. Those are actually spin art things in the middle where you could make your own little thing. If you had seen that show. Another one of his cutouts that he became famous for. And that's the gallery in the same museum, actually, that a few years later ran his series of these bottles. We have more people on the roster if you'd care to look, but those are the ones who I think we can best show you an arc from sort of where you guys are as graduate students and in digital photography to what can happen in a career. You know, it's every aspect. There's fashion people who are very lifestyle-y, and then there's still life, like Robin, who are very classic and Irving Penn-like, and then there's total weirdos like this who get to do whatever they want and be totally successful. Our daily life is we won't lie, it's a lot of sales. You know, it's a lot of getting those people who pay the money to A, look at this work, and then B, convince them that those photographers are the right people to take that job. Because as you can imagine, there's a lot of competition. Every job, even when it gets reduced down from 15 photographers, every job, even if they love your photographer the most, are still going to triple bid to other photographers. So a big part of both our jobs is on that side with the clients, convincing them to take the time to look at what we just showed you, organize the online a body of work that's going to speak specifically to that client, like that Arbor Furniture job. I had to show them like 15 different pictures of like, look, these Hermes boxes look just like they would stack your chairs. Like a lot of like very deliberate pointing at people. Lee has to, in the Asian market, has to spend as much time convincing the clients that the people are right and that their teams are good and that they're elevated enough and they get the idea. If they give them, they're going to be able to come up with all that stuff. So a huge part of our job is talking to the clients, and then in terms of the photographer, convincing the photographer, as you'll all be convinced that what we're trying to talk them into is the right thing. You know, like a lot of things I've talked photographers into isn't what they'd pick for their daily life, and just financial isn't enough. You have to sort of give them a reason why they should be doing that job and how it's going to bring them to the next job. That's going to bring them maybe to the museum show they want, or maybe get them the book that they want to do. So besides managing the talent and making them believe that the jobs that we've picked out for them are the right jobs for them, it's really selling. We do a ton of selling, and that's why we made a commitment a long time ago back at Katie Barker and our agency to only represent the people who we think we completely believe in. Like, so we're not out there Willy Lomaning it. We're like selling the people we are super passionate about. And that's only 12 people right now, so it's kind of great. That's our daily life. You know, we've done both. It's been a lot of word of mouth. I worked with a lot of people. You know what? A lot of those people I worked with as photo assistants, who then, for different photographers that I represented when we worked for Katie Barker, we were sort of given photographers. I went to the Yare Festival in France and found Maurice, you know, different places. Or honestly, looking through magazines, I saw one picture of something I thought was incredible and hunted them down and found them. Tom and Jenny I saw in W Magazine, and they were at a different agency, and they were very happy, and I practically went into their agency and dragged them out by their hair to take them, convincing them that I believed in their work so much, and we were gonna have such a great career, and 10 years from now we were gonna look back and think it was amazing, that I just took them. But a lot of word of mouth. I see if someone I know, if Jenny and Tom recommended a photographer, or Lee saw someone they thought were great, we'll take a meeting with a lot of people, and you know, we meet maybe 200 new photographers a month and take one a year or something.
When I first started at Katie Barker Agency, I was working as a junior photo agent, which I assisted Sean, and there was another agent, Allison, and I make phone calls for all the the ad agency or magazines. So you sometimes make call phone calls, and then one day I got this call from Korean client, and then I think she couldn't really speak English that well, and then she was like, Allison's like, oh, we have Lee, and then she's a Korean, maybe you can help her. And then I was on the phone, and then the job went really smoothly, and then my boss recommended me, it would be really good if you can just focus on the Asian market, and they feel very comfortable around you, and then you understand the Asian market and culture and everything, so that's going to be benefit to the artists and the clients. That's how I started, and now I'm with our art department in British McKinney, and most of my clients are Korean, Japanese, and the Chinese market is getting definitely bigger. I work with a lot of Numero China, Numero Tokyo, W Korea, Vogue Korea, and we work with a lot of Chinese clients, and it's definitely
It's asking you how it's different. It's such a complete, I don't know exactly how it's different, only you can answer, but it's so different, and Lee does it so incredibly. With Koreans is what I've most known as the Korean market has a lot of subtleties that are lost all the time on, I think, a lot of different agencies, and Lee, as being also a really big lover of photography, she starts there and then has a cultural similarity and then makes them comfortable right away and just cuts through at least 2 weeks worth of negotiations, and that they right away understand, here's the bottom line, this is what they're going to have. Lee comes to us sort of as the emissary from them, saying here's the most they're going to pay. They're not trying to rip you, it's like when you're dealing with another country, it's like Germany, anyone, you're like, do they really only have that much, or the euro or this? And Lee really saves days and days and days by having she's like a cultural attaché, and then on the shoot just makes everyone comfortable, and there's so much stuff that we don't understand, and the subtleties of what if a model doesn't show up, or if the photographer is being rude in a way they don't know. Lee somehow knows it and gets it done right away, right?
Yeah, and also it's good that we work with a lot of Asian celebrities or politicians, really famous people that maybe they're not famous here, but they're huge in Asia, and it's gonna be a lot of money. Then it's good that I know what's going on there, and it's always good bridge between here and there. And it's good that I represent really amazing artists, and then I can introduce to my country and other Asian countries. And also in the meantime, I would love to have our artists who's based in Asia to come here and then, just introduce their new work and have them work here too, yeah.
Again, having such a small agency, it just has to speak to me or to Lee or to another agent. Like I've seen work that isn't, I don't think that Jenny and Tom's work at first when I saw them at Luring Augustine Gallery was super commercially viable. At the time, everything was very like Stephen Meisel and fashion and white psych backgrounds, and it just wasn't what was commercial at the time. But I love the work so much that if I were seeing any one of you as photographers, I'd only want to see your personal work. It's my job to figure out how I can fit you in commercially. And I'm very honest all the time with Tom and Jenny. When I met them too, I was like, listen, this isn't going to be an easy sell at all. It's going to be really hard. But the work is so good that it's gonna translate. It's gonna take longer. It's gonna be more of a drag if you took pictures of smiley girls like in a Gap ad. Our road would be a lot easier and we'd make a lot more money, both of us. I don't make money until they do. So, but with photographers like that, I just want to see your personal work, and it has to have that thing that like it has to just speak to me. But strictly on a personal taste level, it just has to be. I have to really believe in it. Or I've said to the other 199 photographers, it's like, you don't want me to represent you if I don't believe in your work as much as I believe in Jenny and Tom's. It's your whole life. It's your career. It's easy to be like, when we come to work, there's 11 other photographers. We sort of have to move our attentions around, but we never forget the idea that you're the one who every day is like frantic and worried about what the next move is and what you're going to do, and if you're good or if you're not good or if you're making the right move. So we keep it small, and we believe in it enough to care as much, or at least slightly close to how much you care about your own work. So I always want to see the personal work. I don't like commercial work's great, and we've picked up photographers in our lives that are mid-career. We talked about that earlier today too. It's not just, we don't just have new photographers. I've taken people who have brilliant 30-year careers whose work I love, but it might be the work I loved 30 years ago, and I meet them and realize that they've just sort of been put through the commercial grinder for so long that they just don't have any enthusiasm left. But it's there if someone cares to like bring them back, like, here, do this magazine again for free. You're making all this money, but your work is godless and you hate it and you hate your life, but we can yank you right out of there and make you do something beautiful again. We've done that this year with a photographer who I think is brilliant. So all the commercial work is great. I love taking money for free. Like, they're already doing Avon and J. Crew and stuff like that. That's wonderful. But with the photographers we have, we keep it small so we can work with them every day. And that's why I only want to see the personal work that's really great. Like, if you love it, then I have to see it. If it's your commercial work that you don't love, I don't really care about that. We're all going to have to sell ourselves down the river later. You have to start your relationship with some great personal work. Business-wise, for us, it doesn't matter how many years they've been in the business, but it starts next after you say you like their work. Then the next step is getting all your work, even if it's only 100 pictures. Putting it all together and then saying to like, if you're the artist, I say to you, like, I love your work. Give it all to me. I'm going to put it together in a way that translates into our agency in a way that I would sell you. And if you like what I've done, if we're still thinking of the same mind, if you like the way I've edited your work, for what I think, because I'm the one who has to go stand in front of 50 different art directors at 50 different places every week, not you. Like, I have to do that. So if you like the way I've done that and what I can sell, then we have a deal. We don't have contracts or anything. We just know we're going to be really happy working together. And it comes the hard talk of like, listen, you're not going to get, if your work is really weird and dark and strange, doesn't mean I love it any less, but you're not going to get a Target campaign tomorrow that's going to pay you $150,000. But in 3 years, maybe somebody, Yamamoto or someone cool from Europe is going to see your work and love it. So we just start working together, and usually the people are over anxious and call 5 times a day about great ideas they have or why they're not shooting the Gucci campaign. And so we have to, Lee always stands by me when we do the tell it like it is, like, a lot of mean talk that out of love of like why you're not going to do the Gucci campaign and how many people are in line ahead of you to do it. Like, it's a lot of rough handling too, but when we have that mutual respect, usually when we've got to that point, if I've edited your work and you're like, yes, this is exactly right, this is what I love, then everything becomes really easy. The honesty becomes easy, the hard work for pushing it becomes easy because you really are pushing what you love. And then it just comes to, I take 25% of every penny you make. Sure. A lot of agencies know, when we worked at Katie Barker, if she represented you, you had to be represented by her office in London and in Paris and in New York. And I was in charge of New York. But as far as I'm concerned, we have a relationship with people in Paris. We have a relationship in Los Angeles and in London. But for me, I'm the only one who can represent you in New York. It's sort of like counterproductive. But if you're like, but I love this person in London, I'm not going to London, twice a week to figure out how to best sell you there. So I'm like, take someone. Or if you don't have someone, let me introduce you to a couple people who are nice. But for that one little community, you have to have just kind of one agent. Otherwise, it gets very like. Now, internships are great. You know what? It's a great place to intern because, from our perspective, you get to work with photo producers, the people who put all this together. You get to work with fashion stylists. You get to work with the assistants who work with the photographers who are experts on lighting, or the prop stylists. We represent prop stylists. Like, there isn't one aspect of commercial photography or fashion photography or even art photography that you don't get a taste of when you intern at a place like this, because we produce the photo shoots too, and we run through the creative on every level, and we're really good to interns, right?
I mean, from my experience, SVA has amazing. It's not because of you guys inviting me, but you guys have really good internship program. Because how I started at Simon Johan Studio, Yosemilo, and Details, it's all through the Career Development Office. I don't know if it's still there. They have amazing opportunity, and you should really. And if you guys have any photographers you like to work with, like Terry Richardson, Stephen Mygel, even if there's no opening, you can still apply and see if you like to work with. Sometimes they just let you in, and how you handle it, and so just take your chance and go for it.
We heard Lee. She was an intern at Details with a really amazing what was she called?
Director.
Photo director, Judith Pucker-Ranella. Then went on to the New York Times, but she called up and said, I've had the best intern you'll ever meet in your whole life. You have to hire her. And she got a job the same day. We didn't even, we met her for a coffee, and that was 2005. Mm-hmm. Been together ever since. I think, like, if you're an intern at being a small agency within a much larger one, if you look at art department, where we started, sort of, their roster is so big I can't make sense. It drives me insane even to look at. But we're within the same organization, and if an intern we know really wants to work with Norma Jean Roy, like when I started there, all I wanted to do was meet Bruce Davidson. I just thought he was I still think he's the greatest, and he's amazing. And his agent was there, so I hounded him every day until I was at the National Arts Club with Bruce Davidson. So if you want to work with Norma Jean Roy, be a good intern to us, and we'll introduce you to Norma Jean Roy. I have his number myself. Contract. When I say people have to pay for editorial, it's like, you guys will have to pay for editorial. Norma Jean Roy doesn't have to pay for it. He gets paid by Condé Nast, and within that contract a year, which is a phenomenal amount of money, he gets to do what he loves, 4 stories for Vanity Fair, 4 stories for Vogue, but then he is obliged to do 2 stories for Allure and 2 stories for some less things that you would consider lesser for him. But he's gotten such a name for himself, and he's such a commodity that he has a contract that just pays him a huge amount of money every year to shoot whatever stories they throw at him. And he's brilliant at it. If you graduate tomorrow and you really want to get your work out there and out of the way than personal work, and one of those dumb magazines like Radar or Fader or whatever calls you, and they're like, we got this really good thing, you can shoot Zooey Deschanel, it's going to be so cool, and you're like, I love her, I really want to do it, it'll be good for me. They're like, great, you can do it, just do it next Thursday. And you're like, great, next Thursday. I'm like, okay, so get to LA and get a stylist. You have to pay for the stylist, you have to pay for the hairdresser, you have to pay for the magazine doesn't have any money. But they want you to do it, and they want to tell you exactly how you're going to do it. But when you're starting out, to get editorial, there are times where I think it's tragic that young photographers have to say no to a great job because they can't afford to do it. Unless you're going to take Zoe to your house and shoot her in your bathtub, which everyone did back when I started. That's all people did, and they were great pictures. But you have to pay for that. You have to invest in yourself. We had a photographer, Tom Monroe, who even in the later part of his career, he wanted so badly and had to shoot for Italian Vogue because it was such a beautiful, amazing magazine. But he would pay $50,000 to shoot a 6-page editorial that was going to be in a magazine for a month and then get thrown away. But he did it every 3rd month. He just took all the money, he made a ton of money in advertising, but he would invest that much in his editorial career because that's how, when people look through Italian Vogue, that's when Chanel and Missoni and all those people, like Missoni was looking through W magazine when they found Tom and Jenny. Italian Vogue, BCBG or Armani was looking through Italian Vogue and hired him. He's made more than his money back over and over, but he's had to pay for it. And young photographers have to start with portraits. You can do a portrait of someone great, or if you have a great idea, you just have to fund it. So you have to pay. You have to get a model release, and usually you do that a couple of times. With the magazine will do a release, and they'll want you to sign a photo release as the photographer. And usually you look at it and make sure that you can just use the image for anything you want, for your own personal things. And usually the magazine will have an embargo, like if you shoot for Fate or whatever, her picture, they'll say, well, you can't sell it for 3 months, but after that, you have the right to do whatever you want. And after you have 2 pictures like that, there's several great syndication companies. The best one that we work with is called Trunk Archives. If you look them up online, they represent Nez and Vanud and every big photographer, and they just handle everything. Like they get the permission of Zoe's people or the model's people, and they negotiate the contracts, and they take 50% of what you make, but it can be incredible, the money on syndication. But when you're starting out, it's really just a release. If you're doing it for yourself, you have to come up with a little release, but honestly, the people you're photographing that anyone cares about buying an image of, they want their picture taken, and they definitely want their picture resold. It's their business. So it sounds like a little bit sleazy, like, oh, will you sign this so I can sell your picture? But that's what they want. Their PR people want that picture out there, especially if it's a good one, and if someone wants to buy it, they're really happy to say yes all the time. The Japanese market, somewhere you'll never get to go. Right now, when you're shooting a picture of a rock band in downtown, you're not going to know that they're super famous in Japan unless you have Lee. And since you don't, because she works for me, then you have to rely on a syndication company to tell you, oh, listen, these images are going to be great in Japan, and we're going to negotiate this. But when you start out, it's a simple model release form. They all have it, and they're usually going to let you do what you want with the picture. I tell you, it's usually people I know, and rarely with drop-off. I don't look at anyone's portfolio. I'll lie and say that I will, but I won't. But how I've gotten several photographers is also when you send an email. First of all, the email blast or whatever that everyone's so fond of. If it's long or has a thing about where you went to school, I don't care. I don't care about SVA. I don't care about anything else. But if you send one picture that's your favorite picture, whether I like it or not is irrelevant. But if I love it, that makes me. I've contacted people from one great picture, never from a paragraph about you, where you studied, but from an amazing image. I've taken Stein and Marie, our photographer. Mm-hmm. We've had these photographers that I loved, and they just sent a weird, amazing picture, and I was like, I'm calling them back. Or if somebody has seen their work, like Lee's she has such an amazing eye for talent. Like if someone comes back to the office and says, I've just been to this gallery, I saw the show, we should find them, we're relentless at tracking down people whose work we like. If you got that one picture in that one magazine and it's just beautiful and amazing, I'll find out who you are. I will hunt you down. I won't lie and say we definitely look for things that are appropriate to the industry right now. Like if it's all, if you send me a picture that's very lifestyle right now, like Jenny and Donna are very in fashion because everyone does that kind of picture. And if it's all I really look for, and I think you do too, is if it's really specific and it says something really strong. If it's trying too hard to be a fashion picture or too hard not to be a fashion picture, but it is really hard to answer because it's really something that if I look at it and think if I can be bitchy about it, I will. If I can say, oh, that looks like a bad so-and-so's picture, looks like a bad Annie Leibovitz picture, it looks like someone's trying too hard to be Norma Jean Roy. If I can make fun of it that way, I will, and I'll erase it. But if there's just something about it, there's people, I notice it most, me just personally, in portraits. If someone gets a really great portrait of real people too, that's just different. Everyone here can take a portrait, but the one you pick out of all your work, that one little thing with the way an eye is or the way their hand is or something, that's what makes me notice them. And then secondly, it's what, oh, that looks that's better than what I saw in a Gap ad. So, that portrait is what Gap should look like. That's also going to get my attention. But it's the strange hope. And there's a lot more agents than me out there. So that one picture, if it doesn't speak to me, might speak to the next agency over. And that's all you care about anyway, is if it's speaking to that person, not about you don't want to force me to like it. If I don't like it, then I'm not the right person to represent you. But if you pick that one and we have a common language, that's what we look for. I think when we started, we got a fresher, but there was a more, we were saying earlier too, that 10 years ago, and when Lee and I first met at Katie Barker, there were people who would come to us specifically because they wanted to see a new young photographer and they wanted to try something out, something nobody had seen. And then, the money got so tight that the established photographers started taking all those jobs, and the clients started giving them to the established photographers, thinking, I don't want to take a risk. But as a smaller agency, we still do, if it's going to come across, like somebody has an internet thing and they're like, listen, we have a thing, it's only $5,000, which to a lot of young photographers is still a lot of money. It's only $5,000, but they get to do what they want. They definitely come to us before they go to a giant agency like Norma Jean Roy's not doing anything for $5,000. But there's a good chance at our agency there's a young photographer who will and gets to sort of like get their foot in the door that way. So we get a slightly more willing to be creative client that's like, yeah, show me what you got that's off the, that isn't exactly super established, and we have them. And I think Lee's clients do that a lot too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they listen to her advice a lot on like, who do you think, they send the creative, and even if it's a photographer they haven't heard of, they take Lee's advice if it's someone who like, look at this work, it's great. She introduces the clients to a lot of work. I think at bigger agencies, you're not really introducing clients to Andy Leibowitz's work or Craig McDean's work or Stephen Meisel's. You're just there to take the call. Where the small part of us is the like introducing them to new work for sure, and then convincing them that like, no, this is right. Don't get Craig McDean. This is better. This is more alive. And she does the same thing. Lee does the same thing with Japanese and the clients, like if someone they haven't heard of, she spends a good deal of time luring them over to picking that person. I think it's different for every agency. For me, I kind of set the price because I find that photographers like get it wrong both ways. They're either too low, they'll do it for nothing because they so desperately want to do it, or they think they're better than they are and they want more money. And I usually keep them abreast of how I'm going, or we'll start out at the beginning. I'll say to you, this job is 5 shots in one day, and they want to use it in North America. I'm going to charge them. I'm going to put you in at $15,000 for that day, for just your creative fee, and I'm going to see what they say. And if you're like, there's no way I'll work all day for 5 pictures for $15,000, I'll roll my eyes in my head, and you won't see it because you'll be on the phone, and I'll be like, whatever, how much do you want to charge? And you'll say, I want to charge $30,000. I'm like, great, I'll tell them $30,000, and don't expect to hear from them again. You won't get that job. Like, I know those things, and I keep them abreast, sort of, and it's a trust issue, and they usually come pretty close to they're usually very happy with what we've negotiated, because I don't think you can do it for yourself. It's hard to gauge what it is you're doing. All I want to know from you is how much work it's going to be. I want to get a creative brief, and they can see like there's a girl on top of a moon, and the moon is on top of a building, and like if it seems really hard, I'm going to factor that into what I'm going to charge for you. But if it's 3 shots and it's something you're going to enjoy, like I want you to get the job, so I want it to be a competitive price, but I usually start out at the beginning. We have a sort of a set rate on everyone.